You don't expect Christmas to feel like punishment. You don't expect the holiday that warms every home in America to turn into the coldest night of your life, literally. But that's exactly what happened to Eleanor Hayes, a 62-year-old grandma who traveled 6,000 miles through airports, snowstorms, and sheer determination just to surprise her son. She believed she was flying toward family, toward joy, toward warmth. Instead, she was walking toward a night so cold, so merciless, that it would test the limits of her heart and her body. Because when she finally reached their door, in a remote Russian village where the wind burns like knives and the air can freeze skin in minutes, her daughter-in-law looked her dead in the eye and said, "You're not invited. Go back, before we start this unbelievable spree of betrayal, survival, and a mother's love pushed into the snow." Makesha, you subscribe for more real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's begin. That Eleanor had always been the kind-of mother who remembered everything, every birthday, every favorite meal, every tiny detail that made someone feel seen. She didn't have much, not money, not a big house, not a fancy life, but she had love, and she gave that endlessly. So Juan, her son, Henry, announced 3 years ago that he was marrying a woman from Russia, a woman named Irina, who came from the far north province of Yakutsk, home to some of the coldest permanently inhabited places. One oath, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She welcomed her with gifts, with warmth, with all the enthusiasm a mother should have when her only child is starting his own family. But something in Irina had always been distant, like the winter she grew up in, cold, heavy, unblinking. Ellen, to brush off the strange tension, telling herself it was cultural differences. Maybe it was the language barrier. Maybe Irina just needed time. But the uneasenly grew, especially after the wedding, when Henry slowly began to drift away. First it was fewer phone calls, then shorter conversations, then messages that took days to get replies. And when he finally said he was moving to Russia with Irina, to her village Olenyov, where temperatures plunged to -60 degrees Celsius in winter, Eleanor felt something sharp and unfamiliar twist in her chest. Still, she never complained, never argued. She told herself that love means letting your children go, even when it takes them farther than you ever imagined. For a long time, Eleanor convinced herself they were happy, but deep down, she missed her son. She missed his laugh, his hugs, the simple comfort of knowing he was close in auto drive too, if anything ever went wrong. So, when December arrived, she made a decision she'd been too afraid to consider before. She would visit them, not planned, not announced, not scheduled for a golden invitation that never came. She would simply show up, on Christmas Eve, and bring with her the warmth of home her son had grown up with. She imagined him opening the door, shocked, smiling, pulling her into the house while Irina begrudgingly accepted the surprise. She imagined the three of them sharing Coco's stories, and a meal like families are supposed to. That was the dream that carried her through the 20-hour journey, through the thick layers of airport security, through the flights that rattled her bones, through the moment that plane doors opened in Yakutsk and a wall of impossible cold slammed into Hurlings, stealing her breath for a moment. Nothing, no documentary, no photograph, no warning, could have prepared her for that cold. It wasn't air, it was an enemy. It bit, it stabbed, it wrapped around her like living frost. But Eleanor kept going. She wrapped herself in the thickest coat she could buy. She followed the taxi driver who kept glancing at her like she was insane for traveling alone. And after hours of driving through white nothingness, snow, ice, silence, they finally reached the village. A handful of wooden houses buried in snowdrifts taller than cars, smoke curling from chimneys, dogs howling in the distance, and a darkness that made noon look like midnight. The driver pointed to a narrow path. "This way," he said, shivering even inside the heated vehicle. "Hurry, too cold to walk slow." Eleanor forced her legs forward, one step, then another. Each breath turned to crystals instantly. The wind hissed through the trees, her eyelashes froze together, her fingers burned, then went numb, then burned again. She told herself over and over that it would all be worth it the moment Henry opened the door. When she reached the house, a squat wooden structure half buried by winter, the windows glowed with warm yellow light. She smiled, a real smile. The first in months. She knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened, but it wasn't Henry. It was Irina, wrapped in fur, her expression colder than the wind behind Eleanor. There was no surprise, no smile, no welcome, just a glare. "What are you doing here?" Aaron asked flatly. Eleanor forced a cheerful breath. I came to surprise you all. For Christmas. Is Henry home? Irina didn't blink. You shouldn't have come. I just wanted to see my son. You're not invited. Eleanor's heart stumbled. Irina, it's Christmas. And, go back. The door closed. Just like that. No explanation. No hesitation. No mercy. Eleanor stood frozen. Literally and emotionally. As the lights inside flickered in the windows, she thought Henry would come running. She told herself, he must not know. He must be grabbing his coat, his boots, ready to fling open the door and scoop her into a hug. But the door didn't open. Again. Minutes passed. Then more. And the cold kept tightening around her, sinking deeper into her bones. By the time she finally realized no one was coming, it was too late to turn back. And she was alone. Outside in -60°C, under a sky swallowing the world whole. Most people have never felt cold like that, cold that doesn't just touch your skin but reaches inside you, gripping your bones as if trying to pry them apart. Cold so absolute it silences everything, thoughts, emotions, even the instinct to move. Forlorn, that moment, standing in the snow outside her son's door, felt like stepping into another world. A world where warmth did not exist, where every choice suddenly felt heavier, sharper, and unforgiving. She waited. Because mothers wait, even when they shouldn't. At first, she told herself it brazenly, a misunderstanding. Maybe Henry hadn't heard her knock. Maybe he was in the back room. Maybe Irina didn't mean what she said. Maybe it was just a moment of stress, or shock, or something cultural lost in the freezing air. Eleanor had always been the type who offered the benefit of the doubt because she believed there was always a reason for cruelty, never that someone enjoyed it. So she knocked again, not loudly, just enough for a second chance. No answer. She rubbed her shoulders, her breath turning into a thick fog that crystallized instantly. The snow was falling in heavy, wet sheets now, gathering on her hat, on her shoulders, on her eyebrows. Her hands numbed quickly, even inside her gloves. Her layers, multiple sweaters, 2 scarves, a coat bought specifically for cold, weren't enough. Not here, not in a place where even locals said the cold could kill you if you stood still for too long. Still, she stayed. She waited for the door to open, for her son to appear, for something to make sense. But inside the house, she heard laughter, soft at first, then clearer. A woman's voice, Irina's, a man's voice, Henry's, the clinking of dishes, the scraping of chairs, the sounds of a warm, comfortable Christmas Eve unfolding with her, that hurt more than the cold. Eleanor stepped closer to the window. Frost crusted the glass, but she could still make out shadows, movement, a figure walking past the window. She leaned in, hoping, praying he would look out and see her. But he didn't. Instead, the curtains were drawn shut. The world on the other side vanished. Deliberately, something inside her cracked. Not shattered, not yet, but cracked like ice under pressure. A tiny fracture that spread slowly, painfully, in ways she didn't fully understand yet. Eleanor looked around. The street was quiet, almost too quiet. Just snow, darkness, and the occasional moan of wind weaving between the wooden houses. A few distant lights flickered from nearby homes, but no one walked outside in this weather, not unless they had no choice. And Eleanor quickly realized she had none. She thought of knocking again, but her hands were losing feeling. Every movement now felt slower, clumsier. She took a step back, forcing herself to breathe steadily. "He'll come out," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He has to." But Henry didn't know she was out there. At least, that's what she wanted to believe. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself and moved toward the small wooden bench sitting in front of the house. Snow had already piled on it, but it offered at least a place to sit, a moment to collect herself. Her boots sank into the snow with each step, the powder rising almost to her knees. When she sat, the cold shot through her, instantly, but she stayed there anyway, because sitting felt easier than standing, and moving felt harder than anything else. She forced her mind to stay calm. "This is temporary," she whispered. "He'll step out. He'll realize I'm here." Minutes passed. The wind grew harsher, slicing across her cheeks, turning her skin raw, and still, nothing. But Eleanor pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She tried calling Henry, once, twice, 3 times. No answer, no answer. She sent a text. "I'm outside, sweetheart. I came to surprise you. It's freezing. Please come out." The message showed delivered. She waited. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. Still no response. Her heart thudded painfully. She leaned back, closing her eyes, letting the snowflakes land on her eyelids, her lashes, freezing them shut for a moment. She shook them off and forced herself to stand again, pacing slowly in small circles to keep blood flowing. Her feet were burning now, that awful sensation that comes just before numbness overtakes them entirely. She stamped them, trying to feel something, anything, but the cold pushed deeper. Across the street, a faint yellow glow appeared as a door opened. An older Russian man stepped out for a moment, dumping a bucket of snow away from his porch. He glanced up, startled to see a stranger standing alone in the storm. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but when he saw the house behind her, his expression changed. He turned away, went back inside, closed the door. Eleanor didn't understand at first, but later, she would realize that people in this village didn't interfere with Irina's family, not out of fear, but out of habit. Irina's family had lived here for generations. Outsiders didn't question their ways, and Henry, though American, was no longer seen as an outsider's son. He belonged to her now, to her world, to her rules. Hours crawled by in the darkness. Her phone battery dropped quickly in the cold. 80%, 65%, 40%. She kept turning it off to save what was left. She tried calling a taxi, but the service had no drivers available in this weather. The nearest inn was over an hour away by car, and walking was impossible. She was trapped in a place where survival required shelter, and the only shelter available had refused her. At one point, she stepped toward the door again, desperate. She knocked weakly, more like leaning against the wood. "Henry," she whispered, "please." From inside, the locker continued. She heard chairs scrape again. Someone turned on music, Russian carols, warm and lively, mocking the silence outside, and slowly, terrifyingly, Eleanor realized the truth she had been avoiding all night. They weren't ignoring her by accident, they were ignoring her on purpose. Her son knew, her son heard, her son was inside, and he wasn't coming out. Snow piled on her hat, her coat stiffened with frost, her breathing grew shallow. Dizziness swirled at the edges of her vision. She sat back down on the bench again, unable to keep standing, her body trembling violently as the cold swallowed her whole. Still, she refused to cry. Tears would freeze instantly. So instead, she whispered one sentence through chattering teeth, more to herself than to anyone else. "I raised you better than this." The wind didn't care. But somewhere inside the house, one person heard her, and still did nothing. The night deepened, and with it, the cold grew vicious. Eleanor felt it wrapping around her body like a living thing, tightening, pressing, numbing. She tried to keep her mind clear, but thoughts came slower now, drifting like snowflakes in a storm, scattered and Every few minutes she forced herself to stand, pacing small circles, counting each step so she wouldn't slip into the dangerous comfort of stillness. Because stillness, in this cold, meant death. She remembered reading once that hypothermia didn't feel like freezing. It felt like falling asleep, like surrender. She pushed the idea away with all the strength she had left. Inside the house, the lights glowed warmly, mocking her through the frost-stained windows. Occasionally she saw shadows moving, two figures passing, maybe more. She imagined the clink of glasses, the scent of warm soup, the heat from a stove. She imagined her son, sitting at a table she wasn't welcome at, celebrating a holiday she had traveled across the world to spend with him. The thought cut deeper than the cold. "Henry," she whispered again, though her lips were stiff now, barely forming the sounds. "Please," but the door stayed closed. At some point, she didn't know when, Eleanor's legs gave out. The bench she had been relying on was now completely buried under snow, so she slid down to the ground, her knees hitting thighs with a muted thud. Pain shot up her legs, but even that was faint now, distant, dulled by the numbing cold. She pressed her back against the fuel of the house, trying to steal even the slightest bit of warmth from its wooden frame. There was none, only more cold. Her mind drifted to memories, warmer ones. Henry, as a baby, bundled in blankets, his tiny hand gripping her finger. Henry at 10, rushing into her arms after his first big school play. Henry at 17, hugging her tightly before leaving for college, promising he'd always stay close. And then Henry, at 29, standing at the airport with Irina, waving awkwardly as they prepared to fly to Russia. She remembered the unease she had felt watching them walk away. Irina had never once looked back. Henry had looked back once, but that had been enough for Eleanor to hold on to hope. She held on to that same hope now. Even as the world grew dimmer, a soft crunch of snow, her eyes lifted slowly, adjusting to the darkness. A figure approached from down the street, uncertain, slow, cautious, not rushing, not stumbling, but walking with purpose. At first, she thought it was the same old man from earlier. Maybe he'd finally worked up the courage to help. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was someone else. A young woman bundled in a thick coat with fur-lined sleeves, a heavy scarf, and boots that looked like they'd survived decades of winters. She stopped a few feet from her, staring at her with wide, worried eyes. "Are you American?" the woman asked softly, her accent heavy but understandable. Eleanor nodded weakly, her teeth. "Why yes, I came to see my son." The woman's eyes shifted to the house behind her, her brows pinched, her expression darkened, not with surprise, but with recognition, as if she already knew this situation, as if she expected you are Henry's mother, she said gently. Eleanor nodded again. The woman let out a slow, angry breath, the kind that fogged heavily in the air. My family lives 2 houses down." She hesitated before adding, "We have seen things were here, things." Eleanor blinked, trying to focus. Please, I just need to see him." Svetlana's eyes softened. Shek knelt in front of Eleanor and touched her arm lightly, inspecting the bluish tint in her skin, the stiff movement of her fingers. "You cannot stay other," she said firmly. "It is too cold, even for us. You will die." "I'm fine," Eleanor whispered, though she wasn't. She could barely move. Even her breath felt thick, like Thea was turning to ice inside her chest. "You are not fine," Svetlana said sharply. "You need warmth." Eleanor shook her head. "I can't leave, not until I talk to him." Svetlana hesitated, torn between urgency and compassion. "Your son, he knows you are here." The words hit harder than through and Eleanor's breath stuttered. "He knows." Svetlana nodded slowly, avoiding her eyes. "Irina does not allow visitors. She controls many things in that house." Eleanor swallowed painfully, the truth finally clawing its way through her denial. "He heard me," she whispered. "He heard me calling." Svetlana's silence confirmed it. A heavy, aching guilt filled Eleanor's chest. Not guilt she earned, but guilt her heart couldn't help feeling. A mother always wonders what she did wrong, even when she did everything right. Svetlana reached out her hands. "Please come. My home is warm. You will freeze if you stay." Eleanor hesitated. She looked toward the door one last time, praying for it to open. That it didn't. Not even a flicker of movement bend the curtains. Finally, slowly, Eleanor allowed Svetlana to help her up. Her legs shook violently, barely holding her weight. Svetlana wrapped an arm around her and began guiding her away from the house. But before they were out, the door behind them opened. For a brief, flickering moment, hope surged. Eleanor turned. Henry stood in the doorway, framed by warm light, his figure outlined by the glow of the home she had longed to enter. Their eyes met across the distance. Her lips trembled. "Henry, sweetheart." But before he could say anything, Irina appeared behind him, grabbed his arm, and said sharply, too sharply for Storm to drown out, "Close the door." He hesitated. Just for a second, but the second wasn't enough. The door shut. The lock clicked. Svetlana's grip tightened around Elana as she whispered, "Come, you cannot stay here anymore." And Eleanor finally allowed herself to be led away, her heart breaking with each step. Her son's silhouette burned painfully into her memory. Svetlana guided Eleanor slowly down the snow-covered path, every step a battle between her freezing legs and the biting wind. The storm had grown worse, so thick and punishing that even Svetlana, who had lived her whole life in this climate, shielded her face with her scarf. Eleanor leaned heavily against her, her body trembling uncontrollably, her breaths shallow and ragged. They reached a small wooden house with smoke curling from the chimney. Warm light glowed through the frosted window pane. Svetlana pushed open the door, and a wave of heat washed over them, so sudden and overwhelming that Eleanor almost collapsed from the contrast. Inside was a simple but a brick stove radiated warmth. Wool blankets draped over chairs. A kettle hissed on a metal grate. The scent of tea and fresh bread filled the air. It felt like a different universe from the brutal cold outside. Sit, Svetlana urged, guiding her to a cushioned armchair near the stove. Eleanor sank into it, letting the warmth seep slowly into her bones. The sudden heat sent painful tingles through her fingers and toes, pins and needles from returning circulation. She winced, gripping the armrests tightly. Svetlana noticed and spoke softly. It will hurt for a little. Your body is waking up. Eleanor nodded weakly. A second woman entered their room, older, with silver hair braided neatly down her back. She had sharp eyes but a gentle expression. Mama, Svetlana said. This is Henry's mother. She was outside their house. The older woman's eyes widened with alarm. In this weather, at this hour. She crossed the room quickly, placing a soft blanket over Eleanor's shoulders. My name is Nadia. You are safe now. Do not worry. Thank you, Eleanor whispered, her voice still trembling. Svetlana poured hot tea into a clay mug and handed it to her. Eleanor wrapped her numb fingers around it, savoring the warmth. She took small sips, feeling it melt down her throat like liquid fire. Slowly, very slowly, the fog in her mind began to lift. For a long moment, the room was quiet, except for the crackling fire. Then Svetlana spoke carefully. We saw you earlier, standing outside. Irina's house is known in this village. People do not approach it unless invited. Eleanor lowered her eyes. I didn't know. I thought she would be happy to see me. I thought my son would want me there. Svetlana and Nadia exchanged a look, one filled with a silent understanding Eleanor wasn't ready to hear. Nadia sat beside her. You must understand something about Irina's family, she began gently. They are strict, controlling. Their customs are old. Their rules do not bend easily, Svetlana added. And Irina is not like most women here. She is proud. She wants everything her way. When she brought your son here, many of us wondered if he would disappear into her world. Disappear, Eleanor repeated, her throat tightening. Svetlana nodded. We rarely see. He does not speak to the neighbors. He follows her everywhere, like a shadow. That is why, Nadia continued softly, when we saw you tonight, we knew you had come in the name of love. But Irina, she does not see love the same way. Eleanor felt tears pressed behind her eyes, but she fought them back. Crying now wouldn't change anything. He raised him differently, she whispered. Henry was gentle. He was kind. He was always the boy who checked on me, who called every day, who never hung up without saying he loved me. Her voice cracked. When did he become someone who could leave his own mother outside in a storm? Svetlana lowered her gaze. Love can be a chain when placed in the wrong hands. Eleanor flinched, the words striking deeper than she expected. Nadia reached out and gently held her hand. You are not at fault. Do you hear me? What happened tonight is not your doing, but guilt, unearned but crushing, swelled inside Eleanor's chest. Svetlana stood, pacing slowly. Irina has a strong influence on him. Your son is far from home, far from everything familiar. He depends on her. People who depend too much. Eleanor stared at the stove, watching the flames curl and twist. I should have seen it sooner. The signs, the distance, the way he stopped calling. I should have done something. Nadia shook her head firmly. You loved him. That is all a mother can do. The truth of the night began to settle over Eleanor like fresh snow, heavy, cold, and suffocating. Her son had changed. Her daughter-in-law had turned him away, and she had flown across continents, only to be left on the doorstep like a stranger in her own child's life. Minutes passed. The warmth threatened to her fingers, her toes, her cheeks, but nothing warmed the ache in her chest. A soft knock sounded on the door. And Nadia exchanged a wary look. Another knock. Svetlana approached cautiously and opened the door just a crack. A young boy, no older than, stood outside, wrapped in layers of fur and wool. Snow clung to his hat. His cheeks were red from the cold. He held something in his hands, a thermos, for the American woman. He said Julie. Svetlana blinked. Where did you ex this? The boy looked over his shoulder nervous. My mother made it, she said. It isn't right for a mother to be left outside on Christmas Eve, no matter whose house it was. Svetlana's eyes softened. She took the thermos and thanked him. The boy ran off quickly, disappearing into the storm. When Svetlana closed the door and turned back to Eleanor, she saw the older woman's expression shift. Pain mixed it with something else. Recognition, compassion, loneliness, the understanding that even in the darkest cold, some hearts still knew right from wrong. Nadia handed the thermos to There is goodness here, she said quietly, even if not in the house you came from. Eleanor held the warm container close to her chest. Her hands still trembled, not from the cold now, but from the emotional blow of everything she had endured. Svetlana sat beside her again. "You can stay here tonight," she said firmly. "You will not step back into that cold." For the first time since leaving the airport, Eleanor exhaled fully, a long, shuddering breath that carried with it equal parts pain and relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Svetlana exchanged a look with her mother, then spoke in a steady voice. "Nothing will happen to you here. But tomorrow, you must decide what to do next." The fire crackled louder, the storm howled outside, and Eleanor, wrapped in warmth yet cracked by heartbreak, realized that tomorrow's decisions would determine more than her trip. They would determine whether she still had a son at all. Ella's eyes were swollen, her body trembling, her breath shallow. She dragged herself backward through the damp leaves until her back hit the trunk of a wide oak tree. Martha swallowed hard. "I have to survive, just survive this night." The words became her heartbeat. The forest trail had vanished beneath a layer of white. Her footprints disappeared as soon as she made them. She could barely see a few feet ahead. Every step felt like walking into a wall of cold. Her teeth chattered violently. Her lips turned blue. Her breath came out in clouds. But she did not stop. She refused to stop, because stopping meant dying, and Martha wasn't ready to leave this world. Not after everything not after all the pain and betrayal that had been thrown at her like stones. "I have more to do," she whispered into the storm. "Andy will not fall here." The snow grew heavier, the wind roared louder, the forest twisted into a maze of shadows, but Martha forced herself forward, gripping a tree trunk when the wind nearly knocked her down. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, cold crawled up her bones like living ice. She collapsed into the snow. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself sink. Cold felt almost peaceful, like a soft bed calling her home. It would be so easy to sleep, to let go. But then, Amory struck her like lightning. Her son, standing at the doorway, telling her to leave, calling her a burden, the daughter-in-law laughing bent him, and then her granddaughter's tiny voice, "Grandma, don't go." The warmth of that memory kindled the fire inside her chest. Martha's eyes snapped open. "No," she croaked. "Not today, not today." With a final surge of strength, she crawled toward a fallen tree trunk, its underside hollow enough to shield her from the wind. She gathered broken branches, dried leaves, anything she could reach with frozen fingers. She remembered what her own father taught her decades ago, how to make a fire in the wilderness. Her weak hands trembled violently as she struck the stones together. Once, twice, again, a spark. Another dot. She cried out when the tiniest flame flickered to life, glowing like a desperate heartbeat against the darkness. Martha cupped it with her feeding it leaves, twigs, breaths of warm air until it grew into a small but fierce fire. Finally, warmth, light, hope. She curled near it, shivering drunkenly, but alive, very much alive.
And with every crackle of the flames, a new strength settled inside her. Cold might have chased her, but it could not conquer her. Martha survived the night, and when morning came, she would rise again, stronger, harder, and ready for the revenge destiny still owed her. The first light of morning crept slowly over the horizon, bathing the frozen forest in a pale, ghostly glow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white. Everything was silent, so silent it felt like even the trees were holding their breath. But Martha was still breathing. Her joints screamed, her fingers were stiff, her face numb, but she pushed herself up from the snow with a strength that felt borrowed from something greater than herself. The small fire she had kept alive throughout the night had died into embers, but it had done its job. She was alive, and today she would stop being a victim. She stood slowly, leaning on a broken branch like a walking stick. The trees towered over her, but for the first time since she arrived in this merciless land, Martha felt taller than them all. Her breath fogged the air as she whispered, They left me to freeze. They wanted me gone. Her eyes narrowed. But I'm not gone. Not yet. With every step she took, her purpose grew sharper. She trudged through knee-deep snow until the first sign of the village appeared. Thin trails of smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. Color slowly returned to her cheeks as she walked, fueled not by warmth, but by the fire raging inside her. When she reached the outskirts, villagers stopped and stared. Their eyes widened at the sight of her. This American grandmother who had survived a night no local would dare to endure. Their whispers turned into murmurs of disbelief. Then shock, then something else. Respect. One older villager approached her, trembling slightly. You stayed out there? All night? Martha nodded once. The woman pressed a thick fur coat into her arms. Anyone who survives a -60 night in our forest deserves protection. Martha didn't waste time. She didn't rest. She didn't ask for help. She took the coat, wrapped it around herself, and kept walking toward the house where her son and daughter-in-law lived. The closer she got, the more a strange calm washed over her. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to plead. Those days were over. Today she would reclaim something bigger than her dignity, her power. She stopped in front of their wooden door, raised her hand and knocked once. Inside there were hurried footsteps. The door swung open. Her daughter-in-law, Tatiana, froze. Her eyes widened, face draining of color. You should be dead, she blurted out. Martha smiled, slow, cold, unshaken. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Before Tatiana could respond, Martha stepped forward. Her presence felt larger than life, stronger than the storm outside, stronger than the cruelty she had endured. Tatiana tried to slam the door, but Martha pushed it back with surprising strength. You left me in the cold to die, Martha said, quietly. But her voice carried like thunder in the small house. You banished me from my own family. You decided I wasn't worthy of sharing a roof with my son. Tatiana's face twisted bitterly. He belongs here. Not with you. Not in America. He is mine now. Martha leaned forward, and that is where your mistake begins. She walked inside the house like she owned it. Her son, Henry, stepped out from the hallway. He froze when he saw her, his expression a mix of shock, fear, and something like shame. Mom, how are you alive? Because I'm stronger than the both of you ever believed, she said. Tatiana snapped. Henry, don't listen to her. She's manipulating. Manipulating? Martha's voice rose like a rising storm. You locked me out in a foreign country on Christmas Eve, in temperatures that can kill in minutes. You told me I wasn't welcome in the home I helped you build. And you, Henry, her eyes burned into his. You let the woman you married erase the woman who raised you. Henry's face crumbled. You abandoned your own mother, Martha continued, her voice breaking not in weakness, but fury. You didn't check on me. You didn't worry. You didn't even look out the window when she told you to shut the door. He swallowed hard, guilt flooding his expression. Mom, I was wrong. I don't know why I... Tatiana grabbed his arm. Stop apologizing. She's dramatic. She exaggerates everything. Martha stepped closer, her voice low and steady. You think surviving the cold was the miracle? She leaned in. No, the real miracle is how blind you are to your own cruelty. Tatiana scoffed. Get out. You don't belong here. Martha straightened her spine. Oh, but I do. And if I walk out that door, I won't walk out in silence. Tatiana froze. What does that mean? Martha reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the recording device her grandchildren had gifted her months ago. She clicked it. Tatiana's voice echoed through the room. Go back, you're not invited. Freeze for all I care. Henry's breath caught. His eyes snapped to his wife. You said that to my mother? He whispered. You left her out there to die? Titania's face turned ghost white. I didn't mean, she made me angry. No, Henry said softly, shaking his head. You nearly killed her. The silence after that felt endless. Then Henry stepped aside. Mom, please come home with me. Titania gasped. You can't choose her over me. Henry looked at her with hollow eyes. I'm choosing the person who didn't try to end someone's life. Titania lunged at him, but he pulled back. She screamed in rage, knocking over a chair, shouting curses in Russian. But the villagers had begun gathering outside, drawn by the noise, and they had heard the recording. Their expressions were filled with disgust. Titania realized something she had never imagined. Her reign in this village was over. As Henry helped Martha out of the house, villagers turned their backs on Tatiana one by one. She screamed at them, but they ignored her. Martha stepped outside, breathing in the cold air, not as an enemy anymore, but as a witness to her victory. Henry wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Mom, I'm so sorry. I will spend the rest of my life making this right. She looked at him, her expression softening just slightly. Let's start with going home. And this time, she walked away not as a woman abandoned at Christmas, but as a woman reborn. A woman who survived the coldest night of her life and melted the ice around her son's heart.